Well, good morning, and welcome to the Global Church Podcast. I'm Scott.
I'm Jim.
And appreciate you tuning in to listen to this episode. And got a few things that we're kind of excited to talk about.
Right, yeah.
Leaving for a trip tomorrow. And
Yeah.
Kind of wanted to start off this morning in our missiology class that we've been having during the second hour, an adult learning center. We had three main components to the class. We started off with giving the biblical basis for missions, and then we went into the history of missions. And this past Sunday, we started on the strategy of missions. And during the prior section, the section on the history of missions, Josh Hummer was doing the presenting on that, and he did a great job of going through each time period. There's major sections of time period where very specific events were happening in the history of the church and missions, and just the carrying out of missions and the spread of the church. And one of the main things that I think really stands out, and it's really no different than what you see all the way through the Old Testament and through Acts, is just the failure of mankind. The ineptitude of man and the divine intervention of God.
Yeah.
Just over and over and over and over, that really stands out.
Yeah.
And it's that way from the very beginning. And it makes sense. That's why 2 Timothy 1:9 says that before the foundations of the earth, God predetermined this eternal plan of redemption that would be by grace and through Christ.
Right.
And he knew.
Yeah.
And
I
we're
agree
the ones
with
that
that.
are shocked.
Yeah. Even all the way back, right after Christ ascended to heaven, and beginning of the church there.
Yeah.
And those lessons are on the website.
Right.
So if you guys wanted to go back and visit that class, the missiology class that Josh did, it was very, very interesting to see the faithfulness of God is really to build His church and to establish His church, not based upon the faithfulness of man, like you mentioned, the ineptitude of man and man's just continual failure, but God's continual faithfulness to establish the church, and it was really encouraging to Rach and I.
Yeah.
And so we walked away saying, hey, to just really strengthen our confidence in God overall, to just build this church.
Right.
Here we are in the States, and coming out of the focus we've had the past number of weeks. Our world and our culture is it's going in the wrong direction,
Right.
running away from God.
Right.
But it strengthened our confidence in God to just remember and rely on the fact that He is the one that's going to be building and establishing His church, and the gates of hell, cannot and will not stand against it.
Right.
So yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, and so then he laid that out over four weeks, and then this past week I began the section on strategy. And so this first week I wanted to show a bit of the big picture of the current status of missions, and in order to begin moving into what we specifically do in terms of our strategy and carrying out global missions here at FBC. That's what the next 3 weeks will be focusing on, what we're specifically doing, how we're specifically involved. But this first week paints the picture of the current status of missions in order to show the importance and the significance for why we do what we do, and why we do it the way we do it, and why we focus on what we focus on. And as I was pulling stats together on just to paint that picture of the current status of global missions today, there were just some facts that I was just shocked by.
Yeah.
You know, we know that the total population of the world right now is like 7.5 billion.
Okay.
And 42.2% are still classified as unreached. That's just phenomenal to me. That 7.5 billion are broken up into like 16,591 people groups.
Okay.
Over 6,000 of them are still unreached.
Yeah.
Just in this day and age of, I don't know, just, you know, modern technology and all that we have to speed up the process and to and make places more accessible.
Yeah.
You know, it used to be that it would take missionaries 6 months to get to Africa or to get to Asia.
Right.
And many of those early missionaries, they packed their belongings in pine boxes, you know, that were going to be their coffins.
Yeah.
And they weren't planning to return. And
Right.
you know, even when Annette and I first went to Thailand in 1989, there was no internet, there was no, you know, texting and, you know, any of that stuff. And it took, you know, at least a week to get a letter home, and a week at least, you know, if somebody wrote a letter right away, then a week, so 2 weeks before you're hearing any kind of response.
Right.
But now it's instant, you know, and it used to be that people did translation on a typewriter. You know, well, I mean, just think about when you're texting just a short little text and how many times you miss a word and, you go back and insert it, you know, or you change it, or
autocorrect.
Yeah, well, when you're typing up a whole page of scripture and you miss a "the," you know, well, you're retyping the whole page. You're not just, and so, you know, just the things that, you know, the technology we have today, and to still have this huge number of unreached people, just kind of blew me away. And then some of the other stats is that, so you've heard of the 1040 window. That's the area of the world that's 10 degrees lateral north of the equator to 40 degrees lateral north of the equator. So it's that rectangular window, and it kind of runs across Asia and the north part of Africa. And so that's where the bulk of the unreached people groups reside in the world, in that 1040 window. It's 40% of all the it's 40% of all the unreached people groups that exist in the world reside in that window. Going on, and then what really blew me away. Okay, so when you look at the just the number of unreached people that still exist in the world, and then you compare it to what we have in terms of our resources today as Christians. You know, first is the number of Christians. You know, worldwide, people who claim to be Christians, there's like 2.2 billion, but that, you know, that includes Catholics and, you know, other denominations. In terms of evangelical Christians, there's a total of like 550 million. And so that means that if you break that down, that means there are 78,000 evangelical Christians for every one unreached people group. Or 900 churches for every one unreached people group. 900 churches.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it just makes you think, how many churches would it take to reach a people group?
Right. So if one church of those 900 churches would take an interest in one people group,
unreached people
group, then
and target them,
and in a sense, then
we'd
have everything covered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then how many of those people groups then, nobody resides just in one country. You have people from every people group probably spread out all over, and many of them even right here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings up another stat, is that there's 1 million international students that come and study in the U.S. a year.
Mm-hmm.
1 million. And
some of which people from our church have hosted.
Right.
Through the years.
Right.
I know there's a lot of international students down there at RMA.
Yeah.
That people here have hosted.
Yeah.
Shenandoah University,
yeah,
I think, has a lot of international students.
Right.
That people here have hosted those types of things is what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
And 62%, so 1 million come and study in the U.S. every year. 62% of those international students are from those 1040 window countries.
Mm-hmm.
So 62% are from, the area where the largest population of the most unreached people groups reside. And so, it's possible to reach people from some of these remaining unreached people groups without even leaving our country.
Right.
It's just really interesting to me.
Yeah, that's a different perspective when we think about it and contemplate it that way.
Yeah.
That they're actually coming here.
Right.
And if there were a way to specifically and intentionally target, reach out to them,
yeah,
and trust the Lord to lead us to hungry hearts.
Yep.
For the purpose of seeing them trust the Lord as their Savior and then be grounded.
Right.
Or maybe lead us to some that are already saved.
Right.
And disciple them before going back to their country, which is the 1040 window, the area that you're describing.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's a way to reach them.
Yep.
Without going anywhere.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
That's a different.
It is.
That's a different perspective on
and
things.
So of those 1 million students that come, another stat said that only 10% of those international students are reached by Christian ministries. And it said 80% will return after studying here without ever having been invited into an American home. 80%.
Yeah.
And then another stat is that 40% of the current 220 heads of state, over 220, countries in the world, 40% of them, the current heads of state, have at one time studied in the U.S.
So they could have been potentially and intentionally reached out to.
Yeah.
Like
if the church in America,
and that could have been impactful to those people who are now currently heads of state.
Right.
In another country.
So if this was a major focus and a major part of the strategy of the church in America, focusing on the international students that come, had this been the focus and the strategy for the last however many years,
right.
I mean, who knows where things could be today? The potential.
Right.
That doesn't mean that everybody you reach out to is going to believe.
Right.
We know that the Holy Spirit has to do that work and prepare hearts, but just the possibility that exists, I just think it's a great, and it just stands out to me as we're continuing to see, in terms of the function of the church and the strategy of the church in our day and age, exactly what Josh laid out, over the last 4 weeks of just going through, the different time periods of church history and the history of missions, and just the failure of the church over and over and over and over, and it's continuing on. And, to have 900 churches for every one unreached people group. Yeah. Man, that's just, the manpower is there. Right. That's just.
Yeah. Potentially possible. Yeah.
Another aspect is the finances. So the resources, in terms of the people, we have, plenty of Christians to do the task, to reach the unreached. The opportunities, it isn't all just going
Sure.
overseas and going to those countries. Because again, many of those, and this is one of the, this is part of the vision of Joel and Rachel in going to Thailand and working with the Thai church. Thailand is just it's a hub. It's a hub for, it's one of the free countries that exists. It's surrounded by many closed countries, and a lot of the people groups that you have in Thailand extend into those closed countries. And so, to go and work with the Thai church and establish the Thai church and help the Thai church grow and mature and begin to have a burden and vision for reaching the unreached in their region.
Different places in Asia.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah. And so just, there's many of those people that are, part of unreached groups from some of those countries that are in Thailand working. I guarantee it. And so that's part of the strategy there. And so the resources for doing the job or, the task, in terms of the personnel, there's 900 churches for every unreached people group. There's 78,000 Christians for every unreached people group.
So there's potentially enough churches and enough people.
Right.
Okay.
The opportunities. I mean, there's opportunities there. There's many, I think, untapped, unlooked at, opportunities for engaging with unreached people groups. And then in terms of the finances, so the annual income of all church members, and this includes Catholics, this includes everybody, is like $42 trillion. And then the funds that are given to just Christian causes in general. There's many Christian causes that aren't necessarily the purpose, evangelism, or church planting. There's a lot of humanitarian work out there, orphanages, schools, hospitals, drilling wells, all that kind of stuff. And so there's so of that 42 trillion, 700 billion goes to just Christian causes in general. And that's okay. So this is people who claim to be Christians worldwide. Well, that's the same amount that Americans spend on Christmas. 700 billion. Of that 700 billion, what is given to missions, and this is missions in general, not just reaching the unreached. There's a lot of missions that takes place in a lot of places and a lot of focuses. And so just what is given to missions in general is 45 billion. So 42 trillion altogether, 700 billion given to Christian causes, and then 45 billion goes to missions, which is 6.4% of the money that's given to Christian causes of any kind. Just 6% goes to missions. Then of that 45 billion, what is going to specifically for the purpose of reaching the unreached is only 450 million. That comes out to for every $100,000 that Christians, this is Christians worldwide, that Christians worldwide give, for every $100,000, $1 goes to reaching the unreached.
It's kind of pathetic.
That amount, that 450 million, that is going to reach the unreached, is the same amount that Americans spend on buying Halloween costumes for their pets. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it just adds to, the picture.
Yeah.
The big picture of how, I just think, again, in our day and age, in terms of, reaching the world, reaching the unreached, the church in general, we just continue to fail.
Yeah.
And the another interesting stat is so a minute ago we talked about the number of workers that we have available. 900 churches for every unreached people group.
Yeah.
78,000 evangelical Christians for every unreached people group. So all the missionaries in the world, including Catholic and Protestant, there's like 400,000 foreign missionaries throughout the world. 13,315 are focused on the unreached, which is 3.3%, are focusing on the unreached. 95% of, so there's like, let me find my stats here. So there's full-time Christian workers in the world. There's 5.5 million altogether, and so that's not just missionaries. That includes pastors, maybe people that are teaching in Christian schools.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of Christian schools around the world, lots of Catholic schools. There's there would be people, anybody that's a Christian that is working in a ministry or a church anywhere around the world. I mean, it could be hospital, school, church, missionaries, all of it. So there's like 5.5 million. Of that 5.5 million, 20,500 of them are working among the unreached. And so that means like 95% of all the Christian workers in the world are working among the reached people groups, not among
the unreached.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Very few among the unreached.
Yeah.
Which again, I just think really adds to the picture and the missed focus.
That's amazing. And I'm hearing a lot of these stats for the first time right now.
Right.
We talked about it for like 2 minutes yesterday.
Right.
And so it's kind of mind-boggling to hear them and take them all in at once. But it is, that's staggering. It's overwhelming to think about that and the process, all that. And again, you shared this in its completeness just this past Sunday in our Learning Center class.
Right.
And so if people listening wanted to hear the full class, and your PowerPoint will be there, right. That's a possibility for
I went through all these stats there.
So if you're listening and saying, hey, that's like super interesting,
right.
I'd like to hear it developed more and actually see the numbers and process the numbers a bit more and think about it a bit more. It's available for people to listen to. Yep. That's amazing.
And then so that just leads, for me it just leads into what we do and why we do it and where we're actually going tomorrow. We're leaving tomorrow to go to Togo.
Right.
And so when I just said that 95% of all Christian workers are working among the reached, then why do we as a church work with the church?
Right.
Why aren't we specifically sending missionaries to these unreached people groups? Why are we working with the church in these countries? And another interesting stat was that that 1040 window, the five of the main countries where the largest population of unreached people groups reside, we're working with the church in 4 of those countries. China, Nepal, India, and Pakistan.
So where we're going to go tomorrow to Togo, we're working with church leaders there.
Yep.
And we're going to be with the LOCPA group. And next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we'll be conferencing with them for 3 days with, 100 or 120 church leaders.
Right.
A lot of them will be husband-wife teams, which is great. But
and then followed by meeting with some of
Yeah.
the leaders from the TEM
right.
group for the first time.
But our goal with the LOCPA group there is to train and equip those churches and the leadership in those churches so that they can go out and reach
Right.
more people.
Right.
And so they're the ones that we see it as being their job to go and to reach these unreached people groups.
Right.
We don't necessarily see it as FBC's job per se. This is kind of trying to get real specific to the conversation of the unreached people groups.
Mm-hmm.
But we have the opportunity to really be involved with a large group of churches,
Mm-hmm.
and then that large group of churches, they then can go out and reach these unreached people groups.
And another stat that I had seen that gives reason for this is that so those 90 those main unreached people groups in that 1040 window from those 5 main countries, they're the locations of those 95% of the remaining unreached people groups are closed to American missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
It's Americans can't go there as missionaries.
Right.
I know that there's other creative ways of going,
Right.
And some do. But
Yeah.
in terms of being free to go there as a missionary like you can in Thailand,
Right.
it's not possible.
Right.
But the national church,
Right.
the church that
Yeah.
is living in that cultural context, if it's discipled and mature in the faith and has a heart for the work of the ministry and has some vision cast for them in terms of what the need is that right around them, right in their own country, they can reach those people.
Right.
And they're the ones that are there interacting with them and meeting some of them in the markets and rubbing shoulders with them.
Right.
And the ones that are there. So
Yeah. Yesterday we were talking to Juan on the phone with the Quechua
right.
folks, and he's ministering to 60 pastors, Quechua pastors, and he was just describing to us there's 15 or 20 new pastors coming to that group. And again, that's the same, tomorrow we're leaving to go with the LOCPA in Benin, teaching that group of pastors. Juan's working with the Quechua and that group of pastors, so that group of pastors can go into the mountains of Ecuador,
Right.
into more unreached groups there. And so the potential is just is great. And again, we could go all around the world and name places where God has us doing that. We were in Malawi in February, and we're going to be going back, or in December, we're going to be going back there in March.
Yeah.
So there's all these different places around the world where God has given us the opportunity to partner with these folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And then in Togo, there are 8 people groups that are still classified as unreached. And then of course, if you know geography and where Togo is, as Africa comes around to the left, that big bump comes around to the left, and then it goes flat before it turns south again. They're right on that flat section is where Togo and Benin are. Well, just north of them is where the 1040 window runs through there, and it's that whole area in the north is it's mainly Muslim, and it's where a lot of unreached people reside, and they're very closed to outsiders. But some of these other African countries is they have churches that are established and mature in the faith, and there's much greater potential for them to reach those unreached people groups than like for us to go from here or for us to send people from here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in Benin, we'll be in Benin first. There's 13 people groups that are still classified as unreached. That's total a population of over 2 million people. So, yeah.
And you mentioned the second part of our trip is really a two-part trip.
Right.
The first part is going to be with the Lokpa, and then the second part is going to be with the Kodakoli and Sokade there. And they're pretty much, this group we're going to be with is going to be former Muslims, and so they're coming out of that background. And so it's going to be a new group that we've never met with before, and so it's exciting to see God opening up an opportunity with a new group that they're gathering together for like the early stages of a Bible school over there that we're able to be a part of. And so we're going to take 3-4 days to introduce them to grace, introduce them to the finished work of Christ, and kind of give a big picture of what we do. We're taking over a ton of lessons. We're taking over almost 2 suitcases full of lessons that have been translated into French, and that's the language that they speak in terms of the Kodakoli group, the Lokpa group. They've got their own language, but we're taking over tons of lessons to leave behind with them and kind of give them an overview of things for a couple of days.
So just all of this, it just really, I just think it's really interesting. I think it really helps us, I think, evaluate, where we're working, what the needs are that still exist in the areas, of the churches where we're working with. It adds to the excitement, I think, of some of the places where we're working, like with some of the churches we're working with in India. India is one of the places that has by far the most in terms of the amount of unreached people groups. It's still there's like over 2,000. 2,200, 2,400, something like that, unreached people groups that still live, that reside in India alone. And I think in the future it would be interesting to do some research and find, list out those people groups and find out how many of them, have people in the U.S. and, what part of the U.S. are they at and that kind of thing. Just in terms of looking at things more strategically. Makes me excited about our involvement with Joshua and Simon in Nigeria, and ECWA, and just their whole organization of churches. They have 10,000 churches, 10 million members, and they've sent out 2,000 missionaries across Africa and some into Europe, and so just the potential, the potential for reaching and going into and targeting some of these unreached people groups, and I just think is great.
We were just this week received some emails from Augustine and Hanson as well, in India, and he was giving testimony to God doing great work in people's lives. And they have outreach going on in different areas, and reaching out to different platforms to communicate truth to people, whether it be gathering other pastors together to help train and equip them to. He was also communicating simply drawing alongside a struggling couple and seeing God, God working in their lives. So there's great testimony of what's going on, over there in India with those guys. It's we get the privilege of reading all those things firsthand, but also get the chance through this channel to share a little bit with you guys about things that are happening as well. That's really wonderful and really neat stuff going on.
Amen. last night I was looking at, just looking up some more information and stats, and on the Joshua Project website, they have a lot of maps and all, focused on people groups and all like that, and they have one that it's a map that just shows, it's color coded, shows the classifications of the people groups, reached, unevangelized, unreached, least reached, and where they're at. And it's like the red are the ones that are they're unreached, and they're the ones that are mainly in the 1040 window. And the map, it just shows, it's like the gospel is just spread around the edges, and it's just working its way in and in and in, and you have this rectangle in the center that's all red, in that 1040 window, that it's just, and and it's, mainly among the Hindus and the Muslims, are the main two religious groups where the majority of the unreached are a part of, and they're they're the most closed and some of the hardest and most staunch, and it's just really interesting to even project ahead and put it together with, even like recently we've taught through the book of Revelation. We taught through it in Kenya, and I've been teaching our community group through it, and one thing that stands out to me about the tribulation is that all through the tribulation there's people that are getting saved, and as you know, as the tribulation progresses, the catastrophes and the hardship that is unleashed on the world gets worse and worse and worse. And at the end, even after all that these people have been through, there's people that get saved right at the very beginning. As soon as the Christians are all gone, I think there's people that recognize what's happening,
realize,
and get saved. And then there's the first wave of the seals being released, and there's people that get saved, and then there's the trumpets, and then people get saved, and then there's the vials, and people get saved. But at the end, there's still people that are still shaking their fist at God, and even after all, there's just the hardness. And when you put that picture, when you consider that picture in light of that map that shows, where the red area resides, and over those countries and the religions that are there, it's like, okay, I could see, I can now see that taking place. I can now, because before you'd read through this, like, how can anybody go through all this and still shake their fist at God?
Be that defiant.
Yeah.
Right.
I can picture it now.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to consider, so it makes me thankful for what God is doing, and what He's allowing us to be a part of here at FBC.
Yeah. So to bring it home to us here, we'd appreciate your prayers. As we head out tomorrow. Ben Sanford's going to go with us, and we'll meet Pete and Carolyn over there. It's a 12-day trip, a little on the longer end of what we would normally take, so we appreciate your prayers while we're gone. And again, we've mentioned it before. You may be saying in your mind, how can I be, or how am I, personally involved in these unreached people groups or in this 1040 window? Well, like we've said before, if it weren't for the giving of FBC, then trips like this wouldn't be possible.
Right.
And the financial support that we're able to send out, to lots of people monthly around the world, wouldn't be possible. So so everybody in FBC is a part of reaching unreached people groups and reaching people, whether you realize it or not. You're a part of it.
Amen.
And so thanks for that. And that's what makes FBC missions possible. Also wanted to just remind everybody that you mentioned Joel and Rachel in Thailand, and they're going to be having some meet and greets, and I mentioned those a couple of weeks ago when we were interviewing them again. And so one is this coming Sunday. It's going to be after the second service. It's at 12:15 in the hospitality suite. So if you wanted to just talk to them more or hear more about specifically what it is that God is leading them to do while they're in Thailand, that would be a great opportunity to just spend time with them. And I know everybody's busy, so we've made 3. There's also going to be one on February the 23rd, and then there's going to be one on March the 1st. So there's 3 opportunities to spend time with them and be specifically involved with them. FBC is a family and we're a body, and we're sending them as part of our family and as part of our body. And so we want, this isn't just FBC Missions is sending them out. Fellowship Bible Church is sending them out. Right. And so this is a chance for people to be involved through prayer, through partnering with them in terms of homeschooling stuff, in terms of when they would come back for home assignment stuff, reconnecting with them, communicating with them while they're there, receiving communication from them back on this side. So I've been thinking about it this way, like Henry, we're visiting colleges, soon to visit colleges for Henry. He's a junior. Right. We're going to send him to school, but he's part of our family. And so we're involved in that sending of him to where he goes. And obviously we're going to stay connected and involved with him as he goes. I've been thinking about it in that context, the same thing with Joel and Rachel. We're a family here. We're an organism. We're the body of Christ here, and we're sending them out. And we have an opportunity to be involved with them as we send them out, and they are an extension of our family and an extension of our body when they are over in Thailand. So just want to keep that in front of us as a family and a body here at the church, and remember those dates. If you'd like to have a chance to talk to him personally or reach out to him or call him and email him or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Amen. Yep.
So.
All right. Yeah. So we want to thank you all for tuning in to this episode, and appreciate your prayers as we're gone over the next 12 days or so.
Yeah.
And look forward to reconnecting after we get back.
Yep. Thanks. Take care.